Have you ever wondered why almost every single country in the world is in debt? If you search the entire global map, you won't find even one government with a completely clean slate and zero debt. Right now, the United States has racked up over $38 trillion in debt. The European Union sits at around $14 trillion, and Japan is close to $9 trillion. Interestingly, even oil superpowers like Saudi Arabia, or massive economic giants like Germany and China, are no exception. They are all struggling under a mountain of heavy debt. This is where it gets mind-blowing, and a massive question comes up. If the whole world is in debt, who is the actual creditor here? Who exactly is lending money to the entire planet? At first glance, you might think the answer is obvious. Countries just lend money to one another. But when you dig a little deeper and peel back the hidden layers of the story, you realize it's far more complex and bizarre than that. Debt isn't just a lifeless number on paper. It is the absolute pillar and foundation of the modern world we live in. Behind every war that broke out, every major financial crisis that brought economies to their knees, and every cycle of boom and bust, the dark shadow of debt is clearly visible. And if you follow these complex clues to the very end, you arrive at an ironic yet terrifying truth. The world as a whole doesn't owe money to any specific individual or country. This world, in reality, owes money to itself. But don't get the wrong idea. It's not like we are all benefiting equally from this game. Far from it. Let's turn back the clock for a moment, a few centuries ago. Picture the year 1694. England was in a desperate situation, caught in a war of attrition with France, and its treasury was completely empty. The gold reserves had run dry, and the king vitally needed money to continue the war. What do you think the king did? He went to the wealthy merchants and elites of the city and cut a deal with them. He told them, "Give me capital now, and in return I promise to pay you interest in the future using the taxes I extract straight out of the people's pockets." To manage this new game, they established the Bank of England. This single event completely changed the course of history. Before that, governments had to acquire money first before they could spend it. But from that moment on, the system shifted in a way that allowed them to spend money that hadn't even been created yet, money that didn't even exist. In return, the lenders received a valuable asset, the government's official promise to pay them back. This simple commitment later became the very foundation of what we call government bonds today. That was exactly how the modern financial system was born. France quickly copied this formula, the Netherlands developed it further, and the newly independent United States immediately jumped on the bandwagon so it could conquer the Western territories. From then on, national debt was no longer a badge of shame or defeat. It had become a status symbol and the ultimate measure of creditworthiness. The formula became simple. If you could borrow more, it meant you were more powerful. This meant that trust directly equaled power. Now let's fast forward to the present day. Today, debt is no longer just a crisis or a simple problem. It has turned into the world's biggest commodity and export. The US owes $38 trillion, Japan owes $9 trillion. And the crazy part is that every 100 days, global debt skyrockets by another $1 trillion. We are all caught in this endless chain. Banks lend, corporations borrow, you and I are tied down by mortgages and installments, and governments keep issuing bonds. We are all just cogs inside this giant machine. But we still haven't answered that main question. Who does all this debt actually belong to? Let's start with the superpower itself, the US. Many people assume that China owns America and that the US is completely indebted to them. But the reality is that the vast majority of this debt is actually held internally, right within the American system itself. Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve itself are holding these bonds. Japan and China own a share too, but China actually owns just about 2% of this massive mountain of debt. The game works like this. The government issues bonds, banks buy them, and the government pays them interest. This interest eventually goes into pension funds and ultimately flows right back into the hands of the citizens. We are dealing with a completely closed loop. The system is basically moving money from its left pocket to its right pocket. And this game isn't limited to America. It's a global domino effect. Japan buys US bonds, the US lends to Europe through the IMF, Europe lends to struggling and developing nations, and those developing countries, in order to preserve the value of their assets, reinvest their foreign reserves back into Western banks, essentially lending it back to them. It's exactly like a group of friends sitting around a poker table, where every player borrowed their chips from the guy next to them. As long as nobody gets up from the table, the game keeps going. But heaven forbid the day that the trust of one of these players vanishes and everything falls apart. In the midst of all this, the financial markets are the real referees of the game. It doesn't matter if it's a democracy or a dictatorship. These mega investment funds are the ones calling the shots, deciding how easily a country can borrow money or how suffocating the interest rates must be just for that country to survive. The central banks are essentially the ultimate masterminds and rulers of this system. They don't just manage debt, they are the ones creating it. Every time the Federal Reserve buys bonds, it is simultaneously creating new money out of thin air. This means the modern money in your hands and mine is fundamentally inseparable from debt. Every banknote you have in your pocket carries an invisible promise to pay on the back. To put it simply, there is no such thing as money without debt. Now, let me reveal a dirty little secret. Governments have absolutely no intention of ever paying off these debts. You might think I'm joking or that this is just some low-tier conspiracy theory, but this is standard operating procedure. When a loan is due, what do you think the government does? It simply issues a new bond and uses that money to pay off the old debt. In the financial world, they call this refinancing or rolling over the debt, an endless cycle that has been spinning for decades without stopping. So this entire giant machine doesn't run on repayment. It runs on trust. As long as everyone else believes that governments can at least pay the minimum interest on these debts, the machine keeps working. But what happens when that trust crumbles? Just look back at the 2010 Greek crisis, or the situations in Argentina and Sri Lanka. When the markets lost their confidence, those countries were plunged overnight into economic ruin and drowning in austerity. But here is one thing they never tell you. When governments are paying out these astronomical interest rates, where does that money actually come from? And whose pocket does it go into? This money is taken directly from the taxes paid by you, me, and the working class, and it goes straight into the pockets of the financial institutions and the mega-wealthy elites who own these bonds. So debt isn't just a simple game between nations. It is a sophisticated, legal mechanism to transfer wealth from the working class straight to the top 1% of society. That's exactly why as global debt grows, the wealth gap widens even further and becomes more alarming. So in the end, who is the real creditor in this story? It's not China, it's not Wall Street, and it's not even the IMF. The real answer is all of them, and at the same time, none of them. The line between debtor and creditor in this system has become so blurred and ambiguous that it's impossible to tell them apart anymore. Debt used to mean slavery, but today it is the very foundation of global balance. But never forget one thing, this balance is walking on a razor's edge. If one day this trust bursts like a bubble, we will all finally remember that debt is nothing but an empty promise for the future. A promise that is impossible to keep forever. If this changed the way you think about debt, subscribe. Because history isn't just about the past, it's the instruction manual for understanding who really holds power today.